Gutsy animal rights activist, pioneering eco-warrior and savior Paul Watson is respected and he is reviled. He is loved and he is hated, and he does not care what you think of him. He cares about his cause. Trish Dolman is an award-winning documentary maker, a writer, director, and producer who spent 7 years getting to know Sea Shepherd Paul Watson and all he entails. The result is a film called Eco-Pirate, the story of Paul Watson.
With the United Nations World Charter for Nature, I'm instructing you to leave this whale sanctuary. You're unlawfully killing whales. You're in violation of international conservation regulations. Remove yourself from these waters. Go back to Japan. Maybe they'll get the idea that it's not healthy to hang around here and go up and leave, you know.
It is my pleasure to welcome documentary maker Irish Dolman. That's good. You're Dutch, aren't you? How about Trish Dolman to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, what a project this has been for you. And Paul Watson, that guy, gave you full access. Mm-hmm. I'm amazed. How did that happen?
Well, I approached Paul in about 2002. I had wanted to make a film about him my whole life, starting from when I was just fresh out of university. But, you know, I started my career, I made a bunch of films, and then that idea came back through a conversation with a friend. So I started emailing Paul in about 2002 and said, you know, I want to make a documentary about you. And we had our first meeting in person at Granville Island. And it was very interesting. You know, Paul in real life is sort of more subdued than he is on camera. And he said, sure, you know, go ahead. Many people have tried. You know, there's been a feature film in development for 20, 30 years now, which has never been made. So he said, you know, good luck. Go ahead.
Right.
Little did I know that I would spend a fifth of my life making the film. But no, you know, he never said there was something that I couldn't film. He never said, you know, go away. He said, you definitely film a lot more than most people. Because when we were on the ships and with him, we just sort of never stopped rolling, because that's how we were going to get past his very media savvy exterior, right? So we just never stopped rolling, pretty much.
What changed for you in the process of doing this? Your environmental conscience, his cause, his tireless fight to save whales, seals?
Well, many things changed. I mean, how I was making the film and my perspective definitely changed over that time. It took me quite a few years to figure out how I was going to tell the story in a way that was going to draw people in who weren't just his faithful followers, because that wasn't the film I wanted to make. I didn't sort of want to make a film that was going to preach to the converted. What's the point? So I really wanted to make a film that sort of delved deeper into who Paul was as a person, into his history, and sort of, you know, through him, see the history of the environmental movement in Vancouver and its roots and the formations of Greenpeace here, because many people just don't know. And I saw other films about Greenpeace that sort of didn't even mention those early days with Bob Hunter and everyone, and I thought, wow, that's so unfortunate. So I really wanted to make a very in-depth portrait on many levels. And so I told Paul, I said, you know, I'm going to interview your detractors and your enemies. So then he sort of got a kick out of that and started telling me, hey, you should really interview Danny Williams. That guy really hates
He doesn't
me.
like him so much in Newfoundland. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and he allowed you to do that, which says a lot about the man. A man of huge ego. He admits it. His third wife said he is a man of huge ego. We all get that. But he did say in the course of the film, please don't follow me like a god, don't follow me like a savior. I'm an ordinary guy with a cause, and I will not stop doing this. I will not stop saving whales until I die, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul Spong says it really well at the end of the film, which, you know, he's not a perfect person, Paul Watson, but Paul Spong has incredible respect for him.
Yes, Dr. Paul Spong, neurologist, did definitive studies on whales, whales in captivity, the intelligence of whales. let's go back to Paul Watson's youth. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, he was born in Nova Scotia. He likes to tell a story of his first sort of activist moment was freeing beavers from leg hold traps. He grew up with an abusive father. His mother died, and I think that was very significant in his formation, and that's part of the film. I tell the story of his family, because I think it was really through his father. He finally stood up to his father when he was a teenager, 15 or 16. I think his father tried to beat him, and he, you know, got physical back and then ran away from home and actually rode the trains across the country and ended up in Vancouver. And I just found some incredible footage of him when he was young. You know, Paul would sort of protest at the drop of a hat, is what he said. And he was a troublemaker, you know, from the beginning. He was a muckraker. He always got in trouble. He got arrested for protesting, and then sort of, I think, found his way into this group of people that would eventually become Greenpeace. So, but I think, you know, his family dynamic was significant in how he acts today.
And as the Greenpeace originators will tell you, the Rex Weilers and, well, not the late Bob Hunter, but I knew Bob Hunter, and they admired Paul Watson. Patrick Moore admired Paul Watson, but they couldn't keep him in the pond because they're nonviolent, you know, peace and green. And he just, at one point, and I think you pointed out in the film, called Greenpeace the Avon Ladies of the environmental movement.
Yeah, he certainly doesn't hold any punches, right? He doesn't care if he offends people, and I think sort of decided that his role was to try and keep Greenpeace honest in his point of view. So he's, you know, been very vociferous in his attacks on Greenpeace over the years, for sure.
Yes. What's the situation today with whalers and
the situation today was a real eye-opener for me to go to the International Whaling Commission conference. It's a very long event, almost a week, and it's sort of a typical government event where there's hundreds of people in a room sort of droning on for days, and you sort of wonder how anything happens or gets decided at these kind of events. But it's very important for activists, and you know, many countries are involved in the IWC oppose killing whales for research. So what's happening today, and I think what Paul is primarily concerned with, is that there was a whale sanctuary created in the Antarctica, around Antarctica. And that was after the moratorium on whaling in the 80s. And it was, you know, the idea was to protect whales, was to create a sanctuary, because most of the great whales around the world migrate through the Antarctic at one time or another, because it's got the most population of krill. So what's happened is there's a loophole that Japan is taking advantage of, where they get a scientific permit from the IWC, and they are given a quota of up to 1,000 whales that they can catch and kill, and for scientific purposes.
So that's like the fox watching the sheep, so to speak. They kill for scientific purposes to raise money to do what?
Well, it's not that they're necessarily raising money. I think what I came to the conclusion of doing the film for so many years is that I think Japan does not want anyone to tell them what to do when it comes to taking things from the ocean. It's a food security issue. So Japan's diet is primarily fish. Their economy is very dependent on their ability to harvest fish and other seafood from the ocean. So the idea that marine conservationists or animal rights activists could tell them to stop whaling, I think, is deplorable. To them, they see it as a slippery slope. And this sort of came clear to me, too, in talking to the Canadian government about why the seal hunt. I think governments sort of see if animal rights activists or environmental activists can affect legislation and stop people from taking things from the ocean, where does that stop? So I think that's the case for Japan.
Sure, but as you know so well, because you did the film for 7 years, 10 years, if the oceans die, we die. Pretty simple. Back to the early Greenpeace days when Watson was he kicked out of Greenpeace or kicked off the board? I know that that's always been a bone of contention, not sure what happened.
Yeah, in the film, I think Rex Weiler says it the best, you know, history is always debatable. It depends on who you're talking to, and it depends on your perspective. So Paul was on the board of Greenpeace, the first, you know, the early Greenpeace. he was voted off the board. But as he says, he could have stayed a member, but he then decided to leave and form Sea Shepherd. So he left and he was kicked out, is what I surmised.
And the first ship he was on, if we can call it a ship, vessel, the first vessel he was on?
Yeah, his first ship was called the Sea Shepherd, and he used that to ram a very infamous pirate whaling ship, what he calls pirate whaling ship. It was a boat that was whaling illegally without permits. It wasn't really registered anywhere. It was called the Sierra, and that was sort of his first famous act on his own.
Yes, and international attention. Was he shot at?
Yes, he was shot at. On the Sierra, they shot at him. He did ram it quite badly. He really ripped open the hull, which now when he rams ships, it's more like high seas keying. You know, he sort of scrapes the side of the ship. But that one, he really tore it open.
Well, it could be a bit safer in something like the Sea Shepherd or the Farley Mowat, but in the early days when they were in those little dinghies,
yeah.
I'll never forget the picture of after the whale was killed, Paul Watson on the whale, the dead whale, the floating dead whale.
Yeah, that's
in the middle of the ocean.
That's become quite a famous photograph, and I think that really shows Paul's fearlessness. You know, they came across this dead whale. It was the first dead whale they found on the first Greenpeace anti-whaling campaign, and he swam out and climbed on top of the whale so they could show the size, because it was actually undersized. It was an illegal sized whale to kill. It was a young female.
It was a young female, and the blood and all of that, and those pictures were amazing and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to show what they must have seen, both on that first anti-whaling voyage, how they saw it. And I had incredible access to some footage that had been archived here in Vancouver, that, you know, this beautiful old 16 millimeter footage that was shot on that first anti-whaling voyage. And I think there's some great footage of Bob and your old friends.
Yes,
yeah.
Bob Hunter and Patrick Moore and Weiler, very much.
Yeah, Rex Weiler is a wonderful storyteller. He's actually going to be at the Q&A on Friday night.
Oh, how great, because as you know, he wrote one of the definitive books on Greenpeace, warts and all, told most of the stories. There wasn't much he left out.
Yeah, yeah.
Trish Dolman, our guest, she is a filmmaker. Eco Pirate, the story of Paul Watson, opens Friday in Fifth Avenue Cinema, and we'll come back and talk more about Paul Watson, Eco Pirate, still.